As my craft?
Yes.
No, that's as far away as you can get. No, the OTCX1 belongs to everybody. The conception was put together by some very meaningful and caring people, and it was based on a very, very caring and intelligent beings that wanted to see this happen. At the present time, well, me personally, I have to say this collectively because we are working in many different areas, and we have reached the stage of prototype reality where we are now ready to produce when given the signal that they're ready to understand the technology in the reality that it exists. Yes, the answer is we do have things waiting in the wings for people. Well, the first part of the question, I don't recall the statement being made from me that I had these in full operation or in operation at all. I did say that we were working on them, and we do have waiting in the wings things that attribute to making a better life for everybody, and they are in essence free of moving parts, free of pollution, free of maintenance of any kind. And we have to now raise the consciousness. That means wake people up far enough to let go of the old ideas of aerodynamics and combustion engines, etc., and just look into the reality of an easier, a simpler way that requires no fuel from Earth. The fuel comes out of the ethers, known in our vernacular as magnetism. And it's everywhere in the multiverse. Never run out of fuel. And no moving parts, because in the 50s and 60s when we were designing and building them, we did realize to understand vortex mechanics and quantum realities, we had to counter-rotate. This is the way nature does everything. She creates vortices everywhere, and so we had moving parts. Since then, we've met engineers in the electronic field that have proven to us that solid-state circuitry is now alive and well, and moving parts are history. We no longer have to do them with moving parts. So digital solid-state circuitry is an advanced version of what we did back in the 50s and 60s. Well, now I've just my status was a lab tech. I left where the previous job I had was a laboratory technician, and when I went to Carr, I thought that's where I fit in, but I became a gopher. I went for hamburgers and food and hot drinks for the guys, and I worked on the lathe because as a kid I was a machinist, so I knew how to turn things. I knew how to use a bench press, a milling machine, etc. So I did cut some of the parts. I helped hold wires while they were connecting different things. I was kind of a day Friday boy around there. So I had many jobs. I was multitasking all the time. So, but my job wasn't to design, and my job wasn't to build per se. I helped them build it, but I was not the engineer, and I didn't have even though I understood sacred geometry and how exacting it has to be or it won't work. I honored that while I was working, and everything I did was with that in mind. But there was quite a few of us working on it, and so I was just a cog in the wheel. Well, I loved the guy when I met him. He was just pure spirit. His whole heart went out to humanity. He felt when he looked at the earth, like like I imagine, and what he conveyed to me from the viewpoints of Tesla, that we were slowly digging ourselves into a continuous wheel that would just go around and round and not evolve. It would revolve but not evolve because of the technology that was being used, based on a profit margin. The parts, the pieces, the ideas were based. What is my return on my investment? What can I do? What can we do to make more money? And this was not Tesla's idea at all. When he was with Westinghouse and they designed the dynamos at Niagara Falls, he did that. He was offered $50,000 at one time, and he turned it down and said, "No, that's for our work." So that's the kind of man Tesla and Carr were. They put humanity first, and if the money comes, it'll come, and if it doesn't, we'll find a better way or another way. He did emphasize to all of us all the time, 24/7, the the need for understanding what consciousness was, to being consciously aware of every move. If we moved apart from point A to point B, we had to know exactly where we moved it from and exactly where we put it. And the idea of that training was to realize that in sacred geometry, you have to have your alignments exact. If you don't put them in the right place at the right time, you'll get no results. So by putting them and being conscious of where I put this or where I'm putting this at all times, it falls into place, and eventually whatever your cause is will have an effect that's successful. It was to create resonant frequencies of a designated rendezvous or landing point downrange that we were going to teleport to. Teleporting is something that has to do with being outside of what we call time and space. It just is a state of being, a state of the mind, and when the crystal resonated at the frequency equivalent to what was downrange, then we simply had the ability to move through time and space and rendezvous at that point and back again. The engineers, they took a truck and went down, and they had their instruments, and I don't know what they're called, but they equated the location to light and color, or the location was vibrating at certain vibrations and frequencies equated to light and color. So they said, well, this is it. They scanned the area and said, this is where the craft will come and go from. Well, the answer to that is there's nothing impossible, and that whatever is conceived by man can also be achieved by man. We weren't able to fly at one time. We weren't able to go to the moon at one time, and all these are history now, like spaceships will soon become. No, flying is a misnomer. You really can't. Flying is based on aerodynamics, and the craft itself didn't fly per se. It levitated, and once it reached a resonant frequency of where the intended destination was, it simply, to our physical reality, our eyes would become invisible. It would go downrange and come back. And I don't know if I should go any deeper into it than that. If you like, I will. But we were dealing with, and Carr kept us well aware of consciousness and who and what we are. Basically, we are energy. We are force fields. All of us are light beings. We lost the awareness of this because we chose to use our our powers of creation to create a third-dimensional reality, and move through time and space in segments. Actually, energy cannot be created or destroyed, and energy is everywhere. And we are a part of a one collective consciousness that's also everywhere. So in essence, we moved downrange at the speed of thought. We had only to think of where we were going, and we were already there because energy is everywhere. Well, I saw a lot of different plans, and we had scores of plans that weren't. We were obsoleting a lot of the plans because some of the things we were working with didn't come up to speed, didn't come up to the qualifications we required. So there was plans. I might say neatly stuck away, but they were on the benches and they were in the offices. So there was a lot of plans around. Well, a day at OTC Enterprises was a 24-hour day. Someone was on the benches or on the presses or on the designing tables or using what we had to put things together. So, and I remember being at 3 o'clock in the morning, being there when there was almost the whole crew working. Excuse me. But it wasn't a typical 9 to 5 operation. Everyone loved what they were doing, and that made the big difference. When I excuse me, when I chose to go down and take a rest, I couldn't rest very long because I wanted to get back to what I was doing. That's how strong the love of the work was. We wanted to see it work, and the other people, the other engineers and the PR people and stuff were the same way. They get an hour or two rest, or maybe not even that, and they'd want to get back to work. It was a wonderful feeling. I mean, we loved what we were doing, and every time we made a step, we'd all congregate around, and Carr would make us understand how that step came about and what it was, and how important it was to stay in alignment with natural law, keep in resonant frequencies with the flow of energy as it flows. Yes, indeed, and they're very as anxious now, which does my heart a very, very good feeling because they're as anxious today as we were in those days. They understand sacred geometry, the codes that Carr put into the dimensions of mystery, a book that he wrote on poetry and prose and so forth. When he was turned down by the patent office to patent a device with levitation, he had to pull that out, and he wrote a book and said, when the day comes that they'll be able to decode this, we'll have spaceships again, because this is the soul story and simplicity of levitation and how simple it is. Well, yes, there were remnants, and I've carried them for years. Some of the remnants of some of the sketches and some of the specs and a few of the prints, but for the most part, realizing that the system was not ready for what we had to offer, we knew that we might be shut down, and we tried to protect what we had, but the shutdown came faster than we realized. We never thought that would happen so abruptly, and everything was confiscated. Everything was taken out of the offices, all the files, all the prints in the shop, all taken. He knew, and we also knew that we were very close to the edge of being shut down, because as Tesla was encouraged to stop because he was threatening the monetary system, we realized we were a great threat to the monetary system, because what we had to offer required, once built, the spaceships or the devices from the Utron that could be put in people's homes to accumulate and use electricity. There'd be no more need for the grid system and the meters and so forth. So it's a great threat, and to the automobile industry and the petroleum industry. And so we knew, and Carr told us, we don't know if we can get this going before we're shut down. So it was always a knowing that we had to face. But he also said, it's inevitable. It has to happen someday. And maybe we're just the middleman, or maybe we're the second or third or fourth, but someday it will happen, because it has to. Because they'll paint themselves into a corner and won't know how to get out unless they go to the visionaries, go to the inventors, go to the discoverers, people, garage mechanics that are putting these things together, and humbly seek their knowledge and wisdom, because that's where all good things happen, is in the imagination of the little guys. Well, I was told here, we're in Prescott, Arizona right now, and just a mile or two away from here is Yavapai College. And I built a replica of the spaceships. I came out here to build a replica of the spaceship underground. And I designed and built it the same way we built the craft, being very careful to follow natural law. And people that got wind of it came and were very impressed, and they had people coming out filming it and so forth, and they asked me to speak at Yavapai College, and how I could build a magnificent habitat that was running totally on free and abundant energy for $5,000, that was appraised and valued in those days at $165,000. So they asked me to speak, and I did. And that a very grainy video still exists. It's somewhere in the archives of the whole episode and the house. But while I was at Yavapai College, a professor this was when the Freedom of Information Act was in progress, and he gave a lecture there, and I happened to be in the lecture hall when he was going on about all these things that are happening that we knew nothing about. Now they're known as black ops, but in those days we didn't really have a label for a lot of them. We just felt that they were using taxpayers' monies and not letting the people know where the money was going and so forth. But he said one of the things that he noticed, and he didn't even know I was in the audience, but he was mentioning that he was in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and he'd gone down 9 levels underground, 9 elevators or whatever down underground, and noticed that there were bays filled with different, very unusually built devices that looked like it was from out of the future. And one of them that he saw was the OTCX-1, the 45-foot craft that was confiscated. And the orders of the guides, or the guardians of the place, were ordered not to talk to any of the observers. But he happened to make friends with one of the guardians or guards, and he said that they had tried to mount weapons on them, and using a pure magnetic field, weapons are obsolete. They can't be used. So what happened, there was a lot of very tragic and severe accidents, because everything they tried would blow up on them, and they had to abandon the idea. They were going to use them as scout vehicles and so forth. So So I was happy to know that of the location, and I was happy to know that that they weren't going to be able to use it, because those machines, the ones we were building, was for humanity, and you had to have the spirit of love and respect, or they wouldn't operate. I had just got done with. I'd spent some time at the UC Davis, University of California at Davis, with a Professor Moeller, who was designing and building on government grants vehicles that were supposed to be levitational. Eventually, and they were shaped like a circular foil craft, but they had 8 small combustion engines around the periphery, and they'd fire them up, and it would levitate, and the noise was so bad I couldn't even stand it. I couldn't be in the. But I had talked to Moeller and said, that what about if we considered another source for the power, like magnetism? And he rather abruptly told me, no, this is government funded. This is what they want me to do. This is kind of a showtime for the public to see. See, we're working on this. Then I said, well, you expect to ever succeed? He says, not at this rate. We're never going to get more than 100 feet off the ground. So I said, well, okay, thank you. And now he's building floating cars, or get off maybe 10 or 15 feet off the ground. But the amount of money he was being paid on government grants to just make a show that we're working on it, was tremendous. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars for naught. It wasn't going productively anywhere. Yeah, well, this was the intent. Um, I wanted to become isolated far enough away from the mainstream, so that I wouldn't be bothered or looky-loos and so forth, because some of the things that we were experimenting with did have things to do with light and vibrations and some sounds and so forth. So we felt our way over to Prescott, Arizona, and actually about 18 miles north of Prescott is a place called Chino Valley, and we found a very remote piece of land, and we had to have the land invite us, because this is part of sacred geometry. You have to be at the right place. You have to start it with a solid foundation or it won't work. The land invited us through a whole series of very beautiful coincidences. We got the land, and the idea was to build an underground house, and from the levitation point, if we could. But the minute we even thought about levitation, the planning and zoning said, there's no such thing. You're going to have to anchor this and so forth. So we didn't go any further with that idea. We said, okay. So we did build the craft, the replica. It's still there to this day. We were over there just the other day. I think you were with us. It's still intact. It's still functional. It's been remodeled, but we started, once we got it built to a point where I could put up a workbench. I started building small experimental models that I wanted to. We had 12 acres, 12 and a half acres, and I had a meadow down below, and I wanted to levitate these craft around, so that just for tests, to see if we could do it. Well, I didn't have enough of the knowledge. I didn't have enough of what I was doing, so it was taking me quite a bit of time. But we attracted from the neighbors, of our activity, because we were lighting up the whole place, and we had no wires, no telephone poles. We had plenty of water. We were using air wells for water. We were using um, ham radios for telephones, and solar panels, and we had television, we had computer, small computer, Timex Sinclair, 16 kBs, but that's what it was in those days. But everything was running, and we lit up the whole top of the mountain, and our neighbors were using candle lights and and lanterns and flashlights, and so we became a very curious thing to them. So they had people coming out, they would report them to somebody, and they would come out and kind of see, what are you up to here, and so forth. Are you following the codes and the rules? And because our septic system that we put in, I didn't want to go with that. I had got plans from Sweden of a recyclable system that was completely pure and reusable. The methane gas and everything could be used. And I went to the planning and zoning, and they said, forget it. You've got to dig a whole septic system, put a leach line. I had to adhere to something I didn't want to, but we became apprehensive because they were then starting to fly. See, I was being watched ever since I left Carr. They said, we're going to be monitoring you forever, and you're not to ever try this again or get together with anybody and so forth. So then when we started noticing these black helicopters with no markings on them, and they'd come right over with big cameras, and I could see the guy with the cameras just filming our land and trying to film what was inside the underground house. We felt this isn't going to work because they're going to come in and take our land away or whatever. So we put it into prayer, if you will, and just turned it over to natural law, that what the next step would come to us. We didn't even try to plan anything. And a gentleman by the name of Walter Baumgartner, who wrote the magazines Energy, what is the name of that? Energy Unlimited, I believe, is the name of the magazine. He wrote volumes after volumes of the type of work we were doing, and he even had Tesla's work in there. But he came over and said, I'd heard about you, and I don't really know how he heard about us, because we were trying to keep things kind of quiet. And I said, well, we're having difficulty here because we've been kind of spotted, and we've been told, if we, and he says, well, don't worry about that. I've got a place in Magdalena, New Mexico, it's on an Indian reservation, totally isolated, and I've got all the facilities, the machine shop, tool and die to help you. Will you work with me? And I said, sure. So we gave him everything we had, so that if anybody came in of any ideas of, finding something that they could, cause a problem for us, we gave it to Walter. He took him back over to New Mexico, and then very delightfully, we were then commuting back and forth to New Mexico, and he was building small replicas and larger replicas over there. I do still have some of those plans and things somewhere. But he got so far, and the unusual thing that most people don't understand, this isn't a conventional nuts and bolts linear craft. It's not like anything. Not like an automobile. You can't put in a key, turn it on, and run it like an automobile. It's run by consciousness. It's run by synergizing with the craft itself. And when you're working with it, you have to be very, very humble and close to nature, because every detail has to be honored for what it is. And he built it, and he was successful in levitating it off his platform in inches, and it took him a tremendous amount of work to get it that far. And he became very, very frustrated and kept coming back and forth, and we kept going over, and I said, you really have to have the spirit. You really have to love this. This has to be alive. Everything, when you understand it, is energy, but energy is live. It's all alive consciousness. And in order to effectively get off the ground with this type of a device, you have to get very, very close to the consciousness of what you're working with. You have to love every part and love the way it sets and feel how it sets. And if it doesn't feel right, tear it up and start over. Because it won't work unless you feel your way through it. You think your way through it, you'll never get anywhere. Because the thought is very limited. It just doesn't care much about anything outside of its jurisdiction, which is a third-dimensional reality, third-dimensional body. Anything foreign to that is a threat. So it ignores or sets up a defense or even becomes very aggressive to anything outside of its jurisdiction. So, and he had those blocks that he couldn't get out of the way and allow his spirit, the spirit of loving what he was doing, even though he was an engineer and even though he enjoyed the challenge. He eventually, we lost contact because we had to do some other things, and eventually he had to cease his operation. And I don't know, I never talked to him in the final days or whatever, so, and I heard he's gone to Canada. He went to Canada and was trying to affect building them in Canada with somebody, but that's the last I'd ever heard of him.